Hey everyone, today I thought we'd do something a little different and look back into how the game has developed throughout the years with a series of retrospective videos on each chapter, looking at how the chapter influenced the game and what it fundamentally brought to it and if it has had any form of lasting effect to this day. We're going to start this off with the Ghostface chapter. This may be a strange place to start, but for me, this is my start. I started playing the game in June of 2019, just after the Ghostface PTB had been released and he was now on live servers. As a result, he was also the very first killer I faced in the game. So in many ways, this character and also DLC definitely hold a degree of significance to me. I also think this chapter holds a lot of significance for Dead by Daylight as a game, as it was pretty new and unique in quite a few ways. It was the first chapter held up entirely by a singular killer, with no respective survivor or map released alongside him. There had been the Left Behind paragraph, the Leatherface paragraph, and the Ash vs Evil Dead paragraph, but none of them were chapters. Ghostface was also a very unique type of license that Behavior had acquired, technically being half licensed and half original, as the only licensed part about Ghostface in Dead by Daylight is the mask. Everything else is Behavior. This is pretty strange, to be honest, and the only current occurrence of this in the history of Dead by Daylight. So Behavior were effectively facing up to more well-known Ghostface versions in film series like Scream. Finally, this chapter was for the 3-year anniversary of the game. Basically, Ghostface had a lot to live up to despite the initial seeming simplicity of his chapter. Anyway, back to the start. The date is May 31st, 2019. And the annual anniversary stream goes live. To say the least, the trailer was pretty cool. It featured a very detailed animation with Ghostface in a supermarket buying some rope tape and a hunting knife. The other star of this trailer being the checkout guy, who has been given the name Cashier Carl by the community. Cashier Carl was as much a part of this trailer as Ghostface was really. The thing that was so great about this trailer was that it immediately set the tone for what this character was, and the direction Behavior were going in. You could tell immediately that they really cared about getting this right, and despite them only holding a license for the mask, they really wanted to make sure that you knew this was a character and personality. It wasn't just a shallow cash-in on the iconicity of the mask itself. This trailer did that perfectly, and also suggested that the killers in-game didn't all have to be these serious, bloodthirsty people. This reveal laid out things to come and showed a promising path ahead for this new iteration of the character. It is a shame, however, that we didn't end up getting Cashier Carl as the survivor. As this was shown during the Year 3 anniversary stream, there were also a bunch of other announcements. There was a pretty cool roadmap that featured all of the upcoming content, some things of note being the announcement of the archives, map reworks, and Freddy's rework. Despite all this good upcoming stuff, it still seemed that within the community, Ghostface was still in the spotlight. Despite this reveal going so well, there had been issues prior with Ghostface. In the 2.7.0 mid-chapter, the devs had accidentally released a dev build onto live servers, which featured the Ghostface and his chapter changes. This basically allowed some people to play him early. This resulted in all players being forced off of the servers and then a new update being rolled out. This was still early days of his character though, and people wouldn't get a proper look at him until the PTB. So the PTB rolls around and we get our first in-game look at the Ghostface. For the lore, they went in a more humoristic direction with this killer, focusing on his personality and the fun and enjoyment that he gets from killing, yet the clear underlying code he has that allows him to be precise and meticulous. As the devs put it, he's a murderer, not a thief. He's a messed up guy and he's pretty sadistic, but he has a code. And a code which has likely kept him hidden this whole time. He's smart despite his silliness. Tasked with the challenge of creating a new Ghostface killer, the devs came up with Danny Johnson, also known as Jed Olson, in his final residence of Roseville. Jed Olson, the small-town journalist, had his nighttime disguise of the Ghostface, a sadistic stalker and murderer. I always refer to him as an evil version of Spider-Man, as he writes about his own deeds in the local paper, accompanied with pictures. And I didn't realize this, but the devs actually referred to him in the same way during their reveal stream, so I think it's safe to say they definitely got that across effectively. Ghostface's lore and story is actually quite cool, and they easily did the character justice with the elusive Jed Olson. The lore ends with Jed revealing the murders he's committed and the coverage he has done of them in the paper, by leaving a note behind on his desk after the investigation into the murders begin to point to him. He leaves Roseville for the next town of victims, and soon after the entity takes him. Let's talk about his design next. The devs mentioned in the third year livestream that around the time they were trying to acquire the license for Myers, was also the time that they were attempting to get a Ghostface license, which maybe gives some insight into their quite similar powers. They further explicitly mentioned in this stream that Ghosty was them revisiting this idea of stalking survivors, specifically as a character in a white mask. They wanted to create intense stress and jump scares, to quote them quickly there, which I think is totally a good thing and was a good direction to go in. Some of my favourite DBD moments were ones against a silent killer and getting jump scared. Once you get acquainted with DBD and how it works, it's not too scary, so it's always nice to have those moments where you get a swift kick back into reality. Ghostface's overall design was really great. For the clothing they wanted something more modern, going for an urban stealth vibe, which they nailed spot on, having him covered in this covert leather outfit and shroud. This design strayed away from the cheaper Halloween costume look found in the Scream films, and tried to modernize it, and I guess in a way make the costume more practical for the more practical and strategic Danny Johnson. To make him more ghostly, they then added the little floaty bits of his outfit, also to show his connection to the entity, and differentiate him from other Ghostface iterations. Finally, the mask they left as a very faithful and clean depiction of the Ghostface mask, as this was essentially the thing being licensed. His power was called Night Shroud, and let him stalk survivors, much like the Shape, except it required you to stalk them each individually, each with a separate stalk bar instead of a collective like the Shapes. This meant you could get survivors exposed much quicker, but it did also mean that you didn't get as much value out of a completed stalk, as the pressure wasn't as substantial comparatively to Myers. Additionally, to fit into Ghosty's character even more, he was given the ability to both lean and also crouch. This opened up plenty of space to do mind games and get better angles to stalk or sneak up for a grab. It rewarded you for playing in this more immersed way too, because when leaning your stalk speed increased greatly, which was a nice touch. Finally, the 3 perks that were released were Thrilling Tremors, a generator blocking perk that activated after picking a survivor up, Furtive Chase, which is an obsession perk that changes the obsession for each hook save and reduces your terror radius in chases. Finally, I'm All Ears, an aura perk which revealed survivors briefly after a fast vault. Thrilling Tremors and I'm All Ears are both very solid and have remained pretty unchanged. Furtive Chase is a really weird perk to be honest, and has also largely remained unchanged. All in all, these were average. So, what actually happened on the PTB? And what was Ghostface like to play at the time? The design looked great, the lore was cool, what about the PTB? Well, that was a different story. Released on June the 4th, the PTB showed off the Ghostface as its main attraction, with a few other interesting additions. Aside Ghostface, there were also new features like rotating your character in the lobby. No, to be fair, there were actually quite a few good small changes that came with this PTB and chapter. There were also some strange additions like getting a red screen flash after a pallet stunner's killer. That didn't end up making it to the final cut. Overall, Ghostface was relatively similar to how he is now, except there was a million different issues that needed to be ironed out. The main issue from the PTB was his reveal mechanic, which at the time was very sensitive. Players reported being able to spin their camera in a circle and reveal Ghostface out of his night shroud without ever really even seeing him properly. As long as you passed over him as the camera spun, it would reveal him, regardless of the duration that the camera passed over him for, to which the devs responded, yeah, that's not meant to happen. His add-ons were also kind of dreadful, and didn't offer too much in the way of helping him out and altering his kit significantly, although arguably they were better than they are now, with his current ones having a very small amount of viability. Further, his power would only reveal or expose survivors for 20 seconds, with a 4-second stalking requirement to make someone exposed. This was rough considering you had to expose the person, run up to them, and then down them. It would mean if you didn't get spotted by someone spinning in a circle, you would likely have a tough time even getting to utilize the reward of the insta-down. Also, when you stalk survivors, the stalk progress would regress after a while. Yep, I don't know why that was a thing. There were small nitpicks made too, such as the fact he was the only character in the game to have a multiple word name, most of the killers simply being the Trapper, the Wraith, the Shape, whereas Ghostface was the Ghostface. Not a big thing, but there were suggestions for it to be changed to something like the Ghost, to fit in with DBD's naming scheme. It's not a massive thing, but it would have been nice I think. And that was the PTB. On the 18th of June 2019, Ghostface became available in-game and was released to live servers. With his release came a few additional tweaks to him and his kit. His reveal time was up to 45 seconds, and time to reveal was left the same at 4. However, his power reach in time was increased to 30 seconds. Generally, his strange reveal mechanics were fixed, although they were briefly fixed a bit too hard, and as a result, survivors found it too difficult to reveal him when in Night Shroud. Ghostface went through some alterations in patch 3.0.1, having some minor nerfs to his add-ons that allowed him to stalk quicker whilst leaning, with some additional changes to make sure his stalk speeds were all working correctly. Minor buffs occurred for add-ons that affected Killer Instinct. There were also additional bugs that were patched out, such as the Ghostface's ability to remain in his power even after getting stunned by a pallet, which wasn't intended. This had to then be patched once more in 3.0.2. There was also the ability to continue stalking survivors after they had already been exposed, and that too was removed. Finally, the biggest one was the alteration to his reveal range for survivors. It appeared that the reveal range had actually been reduced a bit too much after the PTB shenanigans, and so his reveal detection area was increased by 4% on each side of the screen. Overall, not too bad. Freddy got his rework around this time too, and I think this represents a point for the game where we can clearly see a simplification of some things. Freddy's more complex power became one of the most simplistic in the game, and the recent release of Ghostface was essentially a slightly altered version of the Shape stalking power. The next release after Ghostface was Stranger Things, which alternately to Ghostface contained just about all the content you could ever want, featuring multiple survivors, a new killer, new map, and also it just being an incredibly popular license. I think despite this, the Ghostface license wasn't completely forgotten, and was still remembered quite fondly. So, the current state of Ghostface to me is actually not that bad. His detection is largely still quite inconsistent, but at the very least it feels like it favours you as the killer, being generous around corners and such, which I do think is the better option between the two sides. Perk-wise, this chapter didn't really break any new ground, but Ghosty brought two reliable perks to the game which I still personally use to this day, as both Thrilling Tremors and I'm All Ears combo well with lots of builds. Since its release, Ghosty has also received a bunch of great looking cosmetics that don't stray too far from his initially intended look and feel. This only isn't the case with one of them showing off the older, more classic Ghostface look, but I think that's important too. Behavior seemed to be on good relations with the Ghostface license holders also, with the license holders even featuring different DBD masks on their store. It's really cool to be honest, and it feels like DBD has really connected to this license meaningfully, going its own route and figuring out the mask. Ghostface is a killer I can always return to reliably have fun, and it is partly because of the character beneath the blank white mask and shroud. This is a character and license I really love, as this blend between original and license. It's a shame there was such a mess surrounding his actual gameplay at the time, because his visuals and backstory were crafted so well and really gave a good sense of the character, and created a worthy personality to represent the mask, which in itself is characterful. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and let me know what you thought of the Ghostface and his chapter down below. Thanks, and goodbye.